Yasmeen Kadu here, your Dearborn girl poster child that is a lifelong learner and loves all things social justice. So today for our Sabayas series, we have the pleasure of speaking to Narissa, Zahra, and Dana on a topic we don't really discuss usually in Dearborn, and when we do discuss it, I don't think we know we're discussing it. So today we're going to talk about sexual harassment, and I'm going to preface it by saying that sexual harassment is not an issue that's unique to Dearborn, but there are unique facets of sexual harassment that are kind of specific to Dearborn, so we're going to discuss those nuances today. Can I have you guys introduce yourselves, please?
Sure. I'm Zahra Huber. I am a co-host of a radio talk show called The Civil Era with Amr Zahar. I'm also a former news reporter, and we covered a lot of sexual harassment and sexual assault cases, especially in the city of Detroit.
Awesome.
Cool. My name is Dana. I'm a sexual assault kit initiative specialist with Wayne County Safe.
My name is Narissa. I am an advocacy specialist at Access, where I work with health policy and domestic violence prevention, and I am a first-year law student.
So I think we're going to start by defining some buzzwords around sexual harassment and whatnot. So first, I'm going to define sexual harassment, and it's unwanted sexual or verbal advances towards women or men. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to one of you ladies to define another buzzword surrounding sexual harassment. Who wants to go?
We could talk about toxic masculinity. That's a term that is often used in these spaces when we talk about interpersonal violence, domestic violence, and sexual assault and harassment. And when people hear the word like toxic masculinity, if you identify as a man, it kind of like sets you back and you get offended and you're like, well, masculinity is not this toxic thing. Like, I'm a man. I should be proud that I'm a man. But it's really the extreme version that turns it toxic, and it's like the inability to express emotion, or that makes you less manly, or exerting your power over people who you deem are lesser than you. That translates to toxic masculinity, or expressing yourself through violence and like extreme measures that turns into toxic masculinity. So men inherently, it's not like a toxic thing to be a man. It's the way that you go about your daily life.
It's the extreme version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that a lot of people think it just affects men, but it affects women
Of
too.
course, yeah.
Because it's an aftermath of like societal expectations, and it's not something that men are willingly and knowingly engaging in.
Right.
Yeah, but like that's definitely like a big component when we talk about sexual harassment.
Absolutely, yeah.
Who's next?
I can define internalized misogyny, if that's okay with you all.
I love that, yeah.
So internalized misogyny happens, I think, more often in women than in men. So I think we all know what misogyny is, right? It's the idea that men are superior to women, but I think it happens more often when women kind of, I don't want to use the word internalized to define this, but kind of like accept that as something that happens to them daily, and they kind of push masculinity, toxic masculinity, and misogyny forward. So, for example, it's a woman trying to teach her daughter, how to be a good housewife, not really expecting her to go to school, things like that, to kind of perpetuate the patriarchy, if that's something that you would like to define.
Yeah, male-dominated. I think that's the best way to describe it, is just a male domination.
Yeah.
Everything is with the man. The man controls everything. The man, like especially in society. And I think it's a lot in the Arab culture too, which I know we're talking a lot about today. It's very male dominated in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like there's always these standards that are just placed on us that we're not even, like we have to unlearn. When we talk about like internalized misogyny, it's like things that you have to like actively like tell yourself to unlearn.
Yep.
And if we don't do the internal work, to try to like undo years and years and years of this like persisting within our lives, then we honestly can't move forward at all.
We're conditioned.
Yeah, we are conditioned.
I feel like we're conditioned. Like from the moment you're like a young girl, what's your job? You gotta learn to cook. You gotta learn, you're gonna have a husband.
Or like even the toys that you buy as a child.
Right.
Like
you're gonna have babies and, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like easy bake ovens,
Yeah, it's interesting with those things too, because like there just needs to be a choice.
Yeah.
Like the fact that people like put these standards on you but don't give you the option of like, yeah, like what if a little girl wants to play with cars, or like what if a little boy wants to play with like dolls?
It's shamed.
And, like, yeah, it's shamed and it's so interesting because that concept of like honor and shame is so persistent with the Arab American community, and the Muslim community and like the Dearborn community as a whole, because we have these standards and we're constantly looking at everybody else like like what are we gonna do, and like how are we gonna make sure it's like something that's like on the surface and just not being touched. So
it's even as basic as like colors, pink and blue.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just.
And then we accept these things as normal, right? And then going back to your point about internalized misogyny, when we grow up this way, and this is how everyone in our community behaves, and this is what our parents taught us, like this is something that we just believe is inherent.
It's normal.
Because I'm a woman,
It's
this
the
is
norm.
how I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
But it's like that's not the case. We were taught that.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting too because so the concept of like everything being Ayoub, like
Yeah.
I think that's like a big thing too.
Yep.
Um,
Everything is shameful.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like that all ties into everything too, because even any taboos we talk about in the community, I think the word Ayoub is like how we can describe it, because they're just things that like, oh no, we just can't talk about it, we can't do that. So with that being said, so sexual harassment and sexual assault are largely underreported among Arab Americans.
Right.
And I know from all three of your lines of work, you're aware of the statistics and the numbers, but I'm just curious to what you guys think is the reason that this happens.
Honestly,
Well, sorry,
go ahead.
go ahead.
No, you work in it, so I feel like you would probably have.
Well, I just immediately thought of one example. One of my coworkers had two survivors come in. They were Mhajabin and they were from Dearborn. And they had just been assaulted by two men that they went on a double date with, who they didn't really like know beforehand. And they like went to file a police report, and the police said, well, you have to get a rape kit done, which is not accurate at all. Like you could file a police report for literally anything at any time. But the hospital that they went to, I don't remember which one, but like they're not trained on conducting evidence collection kits or rape kits. So they call our crisis line, and then we go to the hospital, we meet the survivors, and we do the rape kit. Once my coworker met them, they told her, you know what, we just want like Plan B medication to prevent pregnancy, and we want the HIV medication, but like we don't want any of this documented. We're so scared. We weren't allowed to, be dating. We're not supposed to be dating. Our parents don't know that we were out with men. We were supposed to just be having dinner together. So you know what, we don't want to file a police report anymore. We don't want a rape kit done. We just want the medication, and we want no proof that this happened. We just want to feel safe and like get the hell out of here.
Wow.
That's not surprising to me
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah,
At all.
100%.
Yeah.
They didn't engage in like any services or anything. They just, after thinking about it with each other, and they're like, you know what, like for whatever reason, the consequences of us getting proper help like is worse.
Yeah.
And that's not how it should be. And I think that when I'm working with Arab and Muslim survivors, that's the commonality. That's like, I don't want my parents to know. I don't want people in my community to think I'm a whore or a slut, right? And then I'm less of a Muslim because I'm dating.
Yeah.
Or I wear a hijab, so I
What will
shouldn't
the
be out with a
community
man.
think?
Exactly.
Right.
So I feel like that's like a common theme with, I want to say like all of the Muslim survivors that I've encountered.
Wow.
And like going based off that, I'm sorry. Kind of like the idea that they're going to feel guilty for this, that they're going to, take that shame and the responsibility onto themselves for what happened, because I've talked to people who have similar stories and who have been in similar situations, and I think the hardest thing for them to cope with is the fact that they think it's their fault.
Yep.
And when it's not their fault, like, at all. And so I worry about, their coping with it, moving forward.
Unfortunately, I think parents play like such a huge role in that. I feel like, so I know that I've talked to you, Yasmeen, like off this, but I was sexually harassed by an employer, an Arab employer, and he was older, and I knew his daughter, and he would use like his power basically as my employer to try and get me to like muta him and like try to do different things, and I kept saying no, 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 and he ended up making my life a living hell. And when my dad found out about it, he asked me, well, what did you do? You know, like, what did you do to like make him do? You must have said or done something, you know. So I didn't want to report it. I didn't want to like say anything, because not only was he kind of a prominent figure in the community where everybody's going to be like, that doesn't sound like something he would do, you know, like this is some young 21, 22-year-old girl who like is probably just like being flirty and, you know, like whatever. And she probably just made him feel good and made him think that, you know, whatever. I mean, if my own father didn't believe it, like, how's anyone else going to believe it? So unfortunately, I think parents do play like a huge role in like, you know, any of it. Like, oh, you went on a date? I think they'll be more upset, for instance, that you went on a date with a guy than you being raped. Like, they lose sight of it. And of course, I'm sure this is not in every household, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of parents would probably react like that. Or maybe they won't react like that, but these women are so trained to like
to
think, what will the community think, or what will my parents think of me, that they don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think perpetrators also, they prey on people who they deem like vulnerable or lack credibility. So I think in your instance, because he had that power over you in terms of like your income and your age, and that you were probably like new in your career, that was an easy target for him. And then in addition to you being a part of like the Arab Muslim community, like it's like perpetrators are smart. They know that they're not going to get in trouble. That if I like own a newspaper, for example, like people look to me for the latest news on everything, right? So they trust me inherently because I provide them the news. So they know the stuff, and like they use that to prey on people.
And I had actually told one of my coworkers at that time too that was happening, and she's like, oh yeah, like he has done this before with someone, and she tried to report it and he squashed it. So I was like, okay, well, what's the point of me even like doing or saying anything about it? I mean, he would corner me in like one of the rooms, and he would try to like kiss me and touch me, and he would send me like really inappropriate text messages. But again, like I was like, what's the point? What's the point of even talking about it? Because I'm just going to be blamed. It's going to make my life a living hell. My dad's, you know, my dad was very focused on what will people think. You know, everything I did, like nothing was actually wrong or sinful. It was what will people think about it.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because like it all comes back to everything being like Ayoub.
Yeah.
And kind of like like we look at things all the time of like, what will the community think? And like with very like even trivial instances where like I quit my job, or I didn't get into med school, and like what would the community think? But like when you have like big things like this, and it's like, what will the community think, and things that affect you on such a personal level, and you feel like you're being silenced, like that's when we need to have these conversations.
But I really want to know, like, why is it Ayoub, and why is it like shameful for us and not so much them?
Yeah.
Because like I can echo your sentiments that like I used to work at Starbucks, like food service, right? And I'm getting paid like what, $9.25 an hour?
Yeah.
And I have these like way older men coming in, giving me marriage proposals, telling me how much they wanted me, taking pictures of me, and I wasn't going to stand for it.
Yeah.
And I realized that, you know, I wasn't going to get fired for really anything at that job, and even if I did, you know, why would I want to stay at a place that wasn't going to take my safety into account? And so, no, I would call it out, and I would, you know, try to strip their masculinity away from them. The worst thing for them to hear is the word ammo.
Yeah.
The minute you call them ammo, that's it.
Oh my God.
And so I would go out of my way and call them ammo, jiddo, hajj, things to kind of show them like you are not young.
Yeah.
Even if you are young, you can't do this.
No.
You can't ever say things like that to me. And no, like I went out of my way to talk down to them and show them, no, I'm a bigger person than you, and you will not speak to me this way.
I think it's also a vicious cycle because, and I was talking about this with someone recently. Obviously, this was accepted by someone previously, you know, probably because the person was like ashamed or didn't know how to react or blah, blah, blah. It was accepted, so they keep thinking that they can do it. So it's almost like a vicious cycle. Do you know what I mean? Like, so like, oh, this was okay with this woman, so it's going to be okay with this woman. But it really wasn't okay with this woman. She just didn't know how to react. She just was ashamed, or she just, you know, didn't want to offend anybody or whatever it is. Just because, you know, she didn't react doesn't mean that she liked it or wanted it or accepted it or whatever. So it's like this mindset in these men, like, oh, it worked on her, I can work it on her,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
But even like talking, right? If you tell people that this happened, it's like, well, nothing really happened to
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
Yeah.
You weren't really affected. Nobody
Yeah.
touched you. But what people don't realize is that this is just the base of rape culture,
Yes.
right?
Exactly.
What normalizes rape, right?
Yes.
It doesn't start off with like, well, it could, but in instances like this, like
it's not just
you're
grabbing
working
your
as
butt
well,
or,
right?
yeah.
It starts
Yeah.
off with like a joke that normalizes
Yes.
rape, or like, oh, I'm just flirting with you. You're so pretty. You
Right.
should be so thankful that you're receiving a compliment.
Yeah.
But things
Exactly.
like that is the base of what rape culture is built on.
Yep.
And you know, I didn't get support from my coworkers at all, and they told me stop coming to work with makeup on, which is offensive
That's
on two
like
levels.
the worst thing, and I feel like that's rape
Yeah.
culture too. Like,
Yeah,
did you see
because
what
it's your fault.
what were you
Yeah.
wearing when you were raped? Maybe you shouldn't be wearing
Yeah.
such a tiny little skirt out
Yeah.
at night. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, why do I have to like?
Alter my appearance
Yes.
so people understand like not to come near me or not to say certain things
Yeah.
to me. That's not fair to me.
Absolutely. And what it does is it paints a picture in our head in what a victim or a survivor should
Yes.
look like, right? When you ask like your average person, what does a survivor look like? They would describe it as somebody wearing a short skirt, or like they have a lot of makeup on,
Tight
or they're out at
clothes.
night,
Yeah.
they're like, but that's, you can't say that about like the 4-year-old child that I had to see after they were just assaulted by a person wearing gym clothes, or like the elderly woman who was assaulted in a nursing home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they don't fit the idea of what like your typical stereotyped survivor of sexual assault or harassment looks like. And so when we keep perpetuating that like that
Image.
look, that image, then it becomes easier for people to like blame it on the survivor
Yeah.
and say, well, this doesn't happen to anybody else, or I wear a hijab, so it's less likely to happen to me.
But that's
which
proves
is
wrong because
very
you just
wrong.
dealt
Yeah.
with two muhajibas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always an interesting thing too with the whole outfit thing.
Yeah.
And like it's all victim blaming. Like it's not anything that we're all gonna like stop dressing a certain way just because like it'll make men
Yeah.
feel better. And it's
Right.
and it's interesting too because we even look at sexual harassment from like a macro level of it's like rape or it's assault, but it's little things too, like being catcalled or being
Absolutely.
stared at or just being made like
Yeah.
to feel uncomfortable
Yeah.
too.
And things like that happen, like how we talk about toxic masculinity, that's what it is. It's to show you that I am powerful. I like control your comfort. I can stare you down. I'm not touching you. I'm not talking to you.
Yeah.
But you still feel this like level of discomfort,
Right.
and you feel like your safety is at risk.
Exactly. I remember once I was walking down, I had a meeting in downtown Detroit, and I wanted to get Great Lakes. And so it was in walking distance. It was only like, 3 blocks? But I got catcalled once, got catcalled twice. And then I started playing this game where I just like shouted out like the number, like
Yeah.
just counting out loud.
Yeah.
Like each time I got catcalled, I think I got back to the car after like going there and back with like 12.
Yeah.
Wow.
And one of those was like a picture. Like a guy like pulled out his camera and like took a picture of me. And
See,
so
And like, how do you even react? Because like, honestly, now I just kind of laugh because it's so the other day I was walking in Dearborn, and some guy, some like bigger white guy with like no teeth on a bike, like walked by and was like, "Oh damn," and I was like, that was my reaction. I laughed because I'm like, does that work? Like, what do you think? I'm gonna be like, oh hey, you with the no teeth on the bike. I mean, like, what did you expect
Right.
to
But
happen?
they know that doesn't work. Like,
Yeah.
nobody ever like got married at the end of like a catcall, right?
Yeah.
It's just to
Right.
exert power
Yes,
over you.
but I just
course,
laugh
of
in their
course.
face because I'm like, you are just so like, this is so ridiculous. This is so ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, when you're on runs and people are doing that, like that's
Yeah.
just like that's this. It's funny, and I always laugh. But then like you stop and you think about it, and you're like, this is high key scary because
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it doesn't happen to guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I
you
say
don't
ew a
know,
lot
like-
now. I'm like, ew, you know, because
Yeah.
like no, ew.
So like when we don't want to laugh it off because it's just too much, and
Yeah.
we don't want to just think about it like deeply and think like, oh, how could I change society as a whole and like break all these stereotypes? Like, how do we hold our men accountable?
Yeah.
Like, what do you guys do with your like your guy friends or your brothers or just any men in your life? Like, how do you like have these conversations with them?
I
Yeah.
think that's a tough conversation.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
It's like, so I get a lot of like Okay, so men can be like, you can compliment a woman, like it's okay.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
It's
course.
because like I've had a lot of guys go, you look really pretty. I don't want to like offend you, blah blah blah, but like your hair looks really nice today. I'm like, you can compliment my hair. You can tell me I look nice, but like it's the way you do it. It's the way you handle yourself. Like, don't be
Yeah.
creepy.
Right.
You know, don't say it in a way where like you want to like touch my hair or
Yeah,
touch
like,
me
yeah.
or like
1,
make
2,
some
3, don't be
inappropriate. Yeah,
creepy.
exactly. So I think like. I think men are also like kind of taking it to the other extreme where they're like, well, I can't even like tell
Like,
a woman that she looks
yeah.
good.
Right,
You
but
know,
Like, I
they're
can't
still
be alone
making
in
it
a
about
room with a
them.
woman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be accused.
Yeah.
But that stuff doesn't happen. But your question's really important because, like, even with the work I deal with so many survivors from, like, that are experiencing, like, all different levels of trauma. And every day I just feel, like, helpless. Like, okay, as much as I try,
Yeah.
this stuff is still happening. Like, I'm still getting crisis calls at hospitals. I'm still seeing 4-year-old girls and boys that are being assaulted by their fathers. Like, this is still happening. And you feel helpless. But then, like, I go home to my 9-year-old brother. And, like, we realize, like, we have power over our surroundings. And, like, we could talk to the people that
Yeah.
we
Care about.
that we care about and that we love. And, like, it's so important. Like, my house is, like, super open. It's super, like, matriarchal.
Yeah.
And, like, he knows everything. Like, we talk to him about what periods are because we don't
Yeah.
want that to be something
I
that's
think
Ayoub, right?
that's the
Yeah.
thing. A lot of
Yeah.
Soaib, like, you don't talk about sex. You don't talk
Yeah.
about periods. You don't talk about, like, anything, like, in that circle at all in our
Yeah.
culture. And I think that's part of the problem.
Right.
Like, who's going to talk to Ammu, who's, like, hitting on you at Starbucks, right?
Exactly. It's not going to be his friends, and that's
No.
why I feel a
Because his
responsibility
friends
to
are
call
probably
it
doing
out.
the same thing.
They are, and it's like, and the minute I say this, everyone's gonna know what Starbucks this is. It's the one with the men who sit outside on the table and play Arba Mia all day and
Yep.
all night and smoke their cigarettes and leave the cigarette butts everywhere and like get double shot espressos all day because
Yeah.
like that's the closest thing that they're gonna get to Hot Coffee.
Yeah.
And they're all doing the same thing. Like from the minute I walk in to the second I leave, they're all saying the same thing and they're all encouraging each other to do
Yep.
it. And for the longest time, I was the only Arab who worked in there. And so I feel like that kind of like painted an even bigger target on my
Yeah,
back.
of course.
And all my other coworkers were like complicit with it. And so, and even when I did like call it out, they would ask me like, why do you even like bother fighting them? Like it's rude. Like, I don't care
No,
if it's rude. It's
they're
rude that
being
they're, coming at me like this. That's not okay.
But you're just showing, like, what's the problem? Like, people don't even see it.
It's
Right.
Like, other people think it's okay.
Exactly.
It's interesting too because there's yeah, we should hold men accountable always, always, always. But then there's like a part of you where you're like, you have to be empathetic with the fact that they were grown up into a society and like they
Yeah.
had these standards and these structures like placed on them where nobody was ever engaging in these conversations with them. And so sometimes I feel like it's an echo chamber when we do talk about these subjects because of the fact that we're all well versed and we all like know that it's not okay, but like those almost, for example, like nobody ever told them like.
But I feel like
Right.
it's common sense.
Not
It's
only
It's common
that,
sense to
problem.
us.
but it's
Yeah.
also like
Yeah.
choices and the
Yeah.
ability for functioning human beings to make choices.
Yeah.
So I can't say like, I just don't know what this means. So I'm just going to go about like, I'm not black. I have no black friends. I don't see racism. I can't say that it's a thing. I contribute nothing to racism. But like, that's not okay. And I think we're at a point in time where like we have to be accountable for our actions and the way we think. And then also like holding people around us accountable. Like my friend could say something and I'll be like, hey,
That's
like
not
that
cool.
wasn't cool. And instead of calling someone out,
Yeah.
because call out culture, I think is like,
It's really uncomfortable,
It
and I
is.
think
Yes.
it
It
shuts
doesn't
people down.
Yeah,
Yes.
it doesn't turn anybody on to like the subject matter that you're
Yeah.
talking about. So like just telling your jidda or your ammo like, hey, that wasn't cool. And like
Yeah.
I'm that person in the family like at Thanksgiving like, don't say anything in front of Dana or else it's gonna turn
Yeah.
into a lecture. But like that's fine.
Oh,
If
well.
I make you uncomfortable with being racist,
Yeah.
Don't be
I'm doing my
racist.
job,
Don't be
right? So
racist.
just don't. You know?
Yeah, it's interesting too because I find like a really nice tactic is if somebody says something like racist, you'll just say like, or even
What does that mean?
sexist.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally. And you say like, wait, what? What did you just say?
Yeah.
And then they think about it for a second and then they they either stop and they apologize, or they like ask you and they're like, well, I actually have this opinion, and then you're able to open up a dialogue that's something where it's productive, where it's, you're right, call out culture doesn't do anything.
No.
Like, you can't be like racist, misogynistic, like homophobic, like no.
Because like they're gonna internalize that label for themselves, and it's not gonna be productive.
Exactly. So there is a part where, like, yes, holding people accountable, but also being empathetic of the fact that they weren't taught this. So when it's like, there is a privilege that comes with what we know and how we view the world to talk to people that don't necessarily like view it the same way.
But I think there's also a privilege in being oblivious and saying that I don't know and this is not something I need to care about because it doesn't affect me. And then also, this is something like I struggle with on my own, like, because you get tired, you know, like when like people know what you do for like my job, that's like all they want to talk to me about, and like, what about this, what about that, and it's like, if you have a question, like, Google exists and like you could do your own research, and then at the same time it's like, well, I want to be the one to like talk to you about this because it's something that I'm passionate about, and like it's like my like I'm a professional in this field, so it's like this balance of like, I am not being paid to educate you, but also, like, I care and I want to educate you.
It's funny because Google does exist, but I think it's much more powerful when it comes from, like,
person.
another human. And, like, even
with experience or who sees it firsthand.
Right.
Even I'm sure, like, if you would tell one of your guy friends, like, that anecdote about, like, your work experience, and, or even you, Narissa, like, the same thing, like, they would be a little bit more, empathetic of the fact, like, oh, wow, my friend, like, Zahra or Narissa, like, had this experience, and, like, this is really bad, and, like, then, like, open up the conversation with other guys and kind of, like, keep moving forward with that. But it is a hard conversation. It's not something that's easy, or it's not something that, like, with time we're gonna be able to just,
because I feel like also, like, if you have this conversation even with like your guy friends or whatever, like, you come off as a prude. Don't you feel that way?
What do you mean?
Like, I feel like you're like, okay, that wasn't funny, that was like really offensive, or blah blah blah. They're like, oh, she's so uptight, you know, blah blah blah. You don't feel like that like, that's kind of like a way of thinking, you know, because there's been times where, like, I'm in a group of people and I'm like, you guys, that was not cool, you know, and I kind of like say it like, that wasn't cool, but I mean it, and they're like, don't take that stick out of your butt, you know, like, they'll make comments like that because you're trying to correct them, but you're coming off as like this uptight person when really you're just trying to be like, hey, don't do that, you know.
I mean, sometimes, like, I'll wait till a little while later to kind of text them on the side or call them and be like, listen, like, it's not that it's bothering me, but like, I do want to help you and talk about this. And so there have been instances where I waited till, you know, maybe the next day or a couple hours later to kind of let it calm down a little bit before I'm like, hey, you know, that wasn't okay and this is why.
Yeah.
You know, one of my like really, really, really close friends, like, we still remember the day that we met. We were on campus and, like, he was like, I was like around my friends and he was there and he said something like super sexist, like a very sexist joke. I don't even remember what it is, but he brings a story up every time. And I just went off on him. And, like, this is a random stranger. I had no idea who he was. And, like, we're, like, best friends now, and we talk about how men are trash all the time. Just kidding. So men are not trash. But, well, okay. I'm not going to get into that.
You digress.
We'll talk about that in a sec.
But, like, it's, like, I get what you're saying, and I feel like sometimes I am that person, but at the end of the day, like, if the people you're around, like, aren't respecting your boundaries and what you deem are, like, acceptable things to say around you, then they don't care about your comfort. And I'm not saying, like, ditch your friends if they're, but it's, like, important to, like, set boundaries also because you want to maintain, like, healthy relationships.
Exactly. Well, like, I don't care, I'll just say it, but, like, I've seen other people who are like, I didn't want to say anything.
I don't want to be that person.
I don't want to be that person. It's like, who cares? Like, then don't be around those kind of people.
You kind of have to be that person a little just to, like, even advance and have any sort of conversations because, like, it can't be the elephant in the room all the time where it's like,
there's balance to it for sure.
Yeah, of course. So, okay, you said men are trash, and that's a really interesting thing because we hear women say that comment a lot, and obviously, like, we don't feel that way, and we don't think that all men are trash, but I want you to elaborate a little bit about that.
So when people, or I'll say an I statement, when I say, like, men are trash, it doesn't literally mean, like, men are trash, like you're a man so you are garbage. Like that's not what it means. It goes back to our first like definition of toxic masculinity. So it's not like men, you are a man, you are a horrible person. It goes back to like that culture of creating like this masculine idea where you're violent, you can't control your emotions. Like if a girl's wearing makeup, like you're itching to comment on her clothes, like you can't control your sexual desires, like. And these are things that hurt men too, right? Because when men are taught, like how we're taught, like, oh, like vacuum or cook, men are taught like don't cry, or you're a boy, you should be playing sports, or you know, like, oh,
you're not making enough money,
or if you're arguing with someone, like you just fight it off, like fist fight, and that problem will be over. So like this harms both men and women. And like when I say, or when, like people on the internet say men are trash, you get men that are like, well, this is sexist, like you hate men. But that's not what it means. It doesn't mean like you're inherently a horrible person because you just so happen to have like male body parts or identify as a man. It's more to do with like the culture that we're responsible for.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because even when you talk about feminism, and so feminism quite simply is just equality, and it's just equality of the sexes, and like kind of both sexes being treated the same way. And I think it kind of operates on a spectrum too of like feminists and whatnot. And so feminists always get a really bad rap, and they're always like, guys are like
anti-man.
Well, so there was one time I went to a lecture during Ashura, and the imam who was speaking just happened to slip in like a comment and say, very randomly, like not conducive to the environment or had anything to do with the topic, he said, oh, women nowadays, like Muslim women in America, they want to be feminists so bad that they could wear the pants in the relationship and like dominate their husbands.
Oh my goodness.
What?
And I'm like looking around like, did no one else hear this? And everyone was just like, you know, like worshiping, like
my jaw would be on the floor.
I was so furious. I stopped, like, if I know that this man was speaking at a lecture or an event, I just would not show up. And, like, nobody else recognized that. And I think as Muslims, too, well, in general, like, people think that feminists, like, I personally, I recognize that men and women have different qualities, right? And even in Islam, it's not that, like, biologically we're exactly the same, or like evolutionary biology doesn't exist. Like it's obvious that we have different qualities, right? And we excel in different things, whether that be due to our like chemical makeup or because of like how we exist in society. But what that doesn't mean is that I get to paid less because I have a vagina.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when like it doesn't mean that I'm saying like women are smarter, men are smarter, like that's not a thing. It just means that like you could lift more weights than me probably, but that doesn't mean that you get to get paid more for it.
Exactly.
You know, so it's not. And a lot of Muslims will tell me, like, how could you be a feminist? You know, women and men are different. And, like, absolutely, men and women are very different.
We acknowledge that there's a difference.
Yeah, but it's just not fair and not very Islamic to say that because I have a vagina and you don't, that I get to be treated any less.
Yeah,
exactly.
Less of a human.
It's more so the hierarchy thing, too, where it's, like, no sex should
patriarchy.
Dominant over the other.
And, like, that's, like, the whole thing when he said, oh, women just want to wear the pants, like, in the marriage, like... Really? What does that even mean?
Yeah. We're wearing pants anyway. And we're wearing pants anyway, whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But see, I hate that the word feminism even has to exist. Because, you know, like, obviously, like, feminists are the ones who, like, when you think of a feminist, like, immediately, like, what do people think about? They think about unshaven, whatever, unkempt, braless,
super short, pixie cut.
Burn the bras, blah, 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 you know? But that's, like, we shouldn't even have to be feminist. We should just have to, like, accept that, like, we want to be equal. We want to be treated equally. We want to, like you said, get paid equally. I mean, we're in 2019 and we're getting paid less than men still.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you'll have people, like, want to argue, and that goes back to my thing about, like, Google exists. Yeah. So many times men will be like, well, no, that's not really true, or a woman has kids, so she stays home, she takes more days off. Yeah. But, like, but I feel like men get days off also for having babies, and, like, these are our collective children, and like that shouldn't mean that because I have ovaries that I am expected to take extra time off and therefore get paid less. Like that's just
Right.
not okay.
But
I think
also
that's a really
this-
American thing.
Yeah, and the stigmas around men too. Like if you think about it, like stay-at-home dads. Can
Oh,
you
yeah.
imagine a stay-at-home father in the Arab
Yeah.
culture?
And then that makes
I'm
you like
sure
less
it happens.
manly.
I'm sure it
Yeah.
happens, but like, I think, even in the American culture, you're less manly for being
Yeah.
a stay-at-home
Yeah.
dad.
And then that also
And then
ties
in the
back
Arab
into how
culture, yeah.
masculinity could be so toxic
Exactly.
to men too.
Yeah.
So I guess that like brings up the point. Let's talk about stereotypes within like Arab men too, because like I hate ragging on Arab men all the time because of like the media portrayal is
Yeah.
just brutal
Yeah.
100% of the time. Obviously the same way for women too, that women are oppressed and like the men oppress us too. And it's a very interesting thing because it's like how do we have to do the internal work with our community and to like advocate outside of the community.
Yeah.
But what are your opinions on that?
I feel like we can't like advance as a group of people unless we figure out like our own shit and like take care of that, because it's very important to have like accurate media representation, but also like if men continue to beat their wives at home and then there's a culture where you can't call the police and like you can't, your kids, you don't
Not
have a
even
job,
that,
whatever,
like,
just this is an
It's
extreme
insane.
example.
No,
but like
it's
that
even,
happens
like,
and then
reporting it and trying to get a divorce.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I know a couple where this guy broke her jaw and sent her to the hospital, and she went to the sheikh, and he said, just try and work it out. Really? Try and work it out?
Yeah.
You just broke her
Yeah.
jaw and sent her to the hospital.
But like that's
Wow.
what they typically do at mosques. The sheikh will tell the woman if she's the one requesting the divorce, wait 3 months and then come back, and if it's still
Right.
not okay, then sure,
and
whatever.
then if you're the one asking for a divorce, you're like relinquishing your rights
Yeah.
as a Muslim woman
Yes.
getting a
Yeah.
divorce.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if the man like comes and asks for a divorce, like the sheikh will give
He's
it
like,
on the
"Alright."
spot. Yeah.
And that's not how it should be. And then
Sorry, I didn't
and
mean
then
to interrupt you.
No, you
You just hit
gave
like
really
a soft
important point.
subject
Yeah,
because
for
like I
sure.
know this couple. Like I know this woman.
Yeah,
like,
and
it was
honestly, we all
ridiculous.
do. We
Yeah.
all know a family
You're-
that's
yes.
experiencing violence in the
Yep.
household. And even if it's like very minor, like I literally have like a power and control wheel, and if you don't know what that is, just like look it up. It exists everywhere, and we have it in the house. Like even like between siblings, between like
What is it? I want to know what.
So it's basically just different forms of abuse, because when we think of an abusive relationship, we think, oh,
Violence.
she or he or
Yeah.
they're like hitting me.
Yeah.
But it's also like
Emotional.
controlling,
Yeah.
like, hey, where are you? Like, have your location on at all times, or like, you didn't cook for me today. Like, don't you love me? Like, you're making me feel really bad, and like that's like guilting. Or if I have a problem with someone and I'm like, well, this didn't make me feel good. Well, you're crazy. There's no way you should be feeling this way.
Yeah.
And that's like gaslighting. So that's also a form of abuse.
Yeah.
So just
So many
recognizing
forms,
these
yeah.
things, so that you know that like there are things that I'm not saying like throw it all away, but there are things that
Yeah.
you can work on so that it doesn't like get to that level.
to the point where
Yeah.
it's oppressive. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I guess it begs our last question. What are all of your hopes for the future of Dearborn in the community in regards to sexual harassment? Whoever wants to go first.
I feel like it just like women should have, and men even maybe in some cases, because I'm sure it happens to men too in the community. And like, does that make me gay? If like
Yeah.
a man touches me or whatever. So I'm sure it's for both sides, but I just feel like there needs to be a safer space to talk about it. I think this is like one form of it. We're here talking about this, but I feel like like we brought to the point of view, like we don't want to report it because what are our parents going to think? I think it needs to start with like families and families talking about it, which I don't even know how to get to that point, to be honest, because we've had this way of thinking for so long of what will the community think, and what will my family think, or oh, like you said, you're a whore, you're a slut because of whatever, because you got raped, you're a whore, or what were you doing out so late at night, so I don't know. I feel like there needs to be some kind of conversation and education. I just don't know. I mean, I feel like you guys would probably be more in that wheelhouse of how to educate older. I feel like it starts a lot with the older generations.
Yeah, absolutely. But also I think like doing preventative work is equally important, because like if something is embedded in the way that you think, right? Like how you said, Yasmeen, it's it's absolutely important to get those conversations going, right? But it's also important to start young and like teaching people about what consent is. Like with my little brother, like if I say, hey, can I give you a hug? And he says no, like don't give him a hug.
Yeah.
Or like he'll say, oh, I want a cuddle. Like I'm really not feeling a cuddle right now. And it doesn't mean that I love you any less. It's just I need my personal space.
Yeah.
And like with kids, you don't have to talk about sex, talk about consent. It's like, can I give you a hug? No. Okay, cool. Or like even with people like classmates, right? Like if, oh, I know you really, really like Genevieve, like that's his crush. Sorry if I'm outing you, Ahmed, but that's his crush. And like if she doesn't want to like hug him or like be near him, like you can take no for an answer. And that doesn't mean she doesn't want to be your friend or she doesn't like you. It just means like she's just not feeling it right now.
Yeah.
So ingraining that in kids' head at such a young age, like it will translate to more like prominent and serious conversations later, so that when he is like he's taking a girl out on a date, right, if that happens, like and she says, well, I don't want to be in the car with you alone, or I don't want to be past this time, it doesn't mean that like we're not into it. It just means like you just have to respect people's boundaries. And also I feel like there's there's definitely a lack of space for us to talk about that. Like I did an Instagram poll once just for the heck of it because I'm super annoying. And I asked like, would you feel comfortable like going to the mosque and asking the sheikh for like help or advice if you were abused or if you were like a survivor of assault? And an overwhelming majority like said no. Yeah. And that goes on to what you said, Narissa, like they will just shame the woman or guilt her into staying in a relationship, or like a virtuous woman is a patient one. Yep. She gives her husband many chances.
What did you do?
Yeah,
like make sure you cook for him.
Take care of your man. He works hard.
Why
and like these are all very nice.
Yeah. Why is
like,
he unhappy? Exactly.
Yeah, but these are all very nice. Like I want to cook for my man if I have time, right? Exactly. I want to make sure that I'm helping raise my kids. Like I'm a feminist, but I also want to be a stay-at-home mom. Yeah. I have ambitions for a career, but as soon as I have my first child, you already know I'm taking that break, right? And I'm going to sit at home, and that's something to be proud of also. Yeah. So it's still like respecting each other's decisions and also making room for choices, but working together to create spaces in the future, hopefully like in the near future, to make it okay for us to sit around a table like this at a coffee shop, at a masjid, and say, yeah, I went out on a date with somebody as a Muslim woman, and this is what happened. And it not be like, oh, she's such a whore. Yeah. Why are you going out? But more like, damn, this sucks. Like, something bad happened to you. You're innocent. You did nothing to deserve it. Yeah. And, like...
what can we do to help you?
How can we make you feel better?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. That was beautifully said.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the judgment thing, I think, is big. You know, like, you need to support your...
Yeah, because sometimes we do that to each other. Like, we think that, like, men are trash, they're our enemies. But, like, when something happens, like, we talk about each other to each other. And, like, that continues to foster this, like, very negative community where I will get abused by a man, or I'm a man and a woman will abuse me. I can't talk to my guy friends. Yeah. Then I'm gay, and being gay is like the worst thing ever. Yeah. You know, in, like, our community. And, like, oh, I don't want them to think I'm weak. But, like, this is all a problem, and sometimes it'll really be your own people.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure.
And to, like, kind of echo that, I think we need to spend a little bit more time having these conversations with men and not so much with women. Yeah. Because I feel like when we try to have these conversations with women, it's a lot more of, well, wear less makeup, dress differently. I think we need to shift the responsibility from how girls either react to this or try to do things to, quote-unquote, prevent these things from happening to... hey, like, XYZ, call out your friends, not necessarily call them out, but, or say your something. Cousins. Yeah, say something and, like, let them know that these things are happening. Let them know that they're happening to you. Yeah. Because I think once they put a face that they know and they love and they care about to these issues, it makes them look at it a lot differently. Yeah. A lot differently. Because I've seen, like, friends' faces fall when I tell them about my experiences with harassment. Yeah. And they get very, like, angry or they get upset. And I tell them, like, this is a real thing. And it's your friends who are doing it, quite honestly. Right. And so maybe you should take your love and your care for me and talk to your friends and tell them, hey, like, whatever you're doing to girls, like, it's not cool.
Yeah. And I've also, like, if I've seen it, I'm like, how would you feel if someone did that to your sister? How would you, well, I wouldn't like it. Then why are you doing it to someone else's sister, someone else's mom, you know, someone else's.
But I think that also has to do with, like, like if you have a certain way that your family like behaves, like if your sister like wears a hijab, right, and wears like shari clothing and like super long, super like modest, right, to what people think is modest, and then there's a woman who looks the exact opposite of that, it's like, well, my sister deserves and demands respect because she behaves and dresses a certain way and like you don't. And that's the reason. But also to echo what you said, Narissa, I think it's also important to include men and like people who don't even identify as men or women in this conversation, because then it's like less of a women problem, and it stops the conversation from being like, okay, what can we do to fix this? But also include allies from all communities, all genders, like everybody talking about it, because it affects every person.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure. You guys are right. It just starts with like starting the conversation, and I think like talking about it in spaces like this is like how we start.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for being
Thank you.
on.
Thank you.
Thank you for
This
having us.
concludes our Sabaya series. Thank you.